friends, and welcome to the CUInsight Network. My name is Robbie Young. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Growth at CUInsight, and it's my job on this show to have conversations with thought leaders who support the credit union community. We'll identify issues affecting credit unions and discuss best practices that help us learn from one another and strengthen our credit union ecosystem. My guest on today's show is Kamila Thompson, Senior Director of Growth at Nexcess. Kamila, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Robbie. I am super excited to be on the podcast and definitely super excited to be sharing my thoughts with the credit union community.
Of course. So most of us didn't grow up thinking that we would get to work with credit unions. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I think like many kids, I was very inspired by Indiana Jones. I wanted to be an adventurer and an archaeologist. Didn't quite work out that way.
Well, I'm just glad there's not as many boulders rolling after us as I thought there might be.
For sure. I tried to watch it with my kid and she thought it was very dated. Not interesting.
Oh, goodness. Don't show her Star Wars. She's gonna really be judging us all the way around.
For sure.
So what was the journey like to get to your current role as Senior Director of Growth at Nexcess?
I was always kind of very much interested somewhere between marketing, data, and technology. I am a marketer by profession. I have been in marketing for a very long time, but also a data scientist by education. Always was super interested in how the data informs us. But then as you kind of start digging deeper, you obviously start thinking about the infrastructure, the data flows, how protected is the data? Is it easily accessible? And so I think I ended up finally marrying the three things that I always love within Nexcess, the kind of the technology, the data, and the marketing. The role was super exciting for me to be able to, financial services is so important. For a very long time, I worked for financial services and credit unions. I very much believe in empowering customers and average Americans to have access to finances, but that data and that infrastructure lives somewhere. So I think it was just like a perfect match of being able to kind of provide services and really kind of live what I believe in a slightly different way, like providing very much the secure infrastructure that all the financial services rely on. So the data and the services can flow to the customers.
So tell me more about Nexcess and where and how they add value for credit unions.
Of course. So, of course, credit unions live and die by their core banking platforms, whichever they are. And they spend enormous amount of energy protecting that core. But here's what I think most don't realize. The greatest risk isn't in the core. It's everything that surrounds it. So the average credit union today has built a lot of systems around their core over the last decade or so. Their member services portal, blogs, digital account tools, mobile banking, marketing website, fraud detection, just general data storages, and those API layers connecting everything. None of that is core banking. All of it's member facing, and most of it is running on shared cloud infrastructure that was probably chosen for a cost, not for compliance. So when a member gets locked out of their portal at 10 p.m. on Friday, they don't think, oh, that's a peripheral system, not a core. They think the credit union has failed them. That's where reputation lives. And this is where the credit unions definitely want to make sure that they serve their customers. And that's where our focus is at Nexcess. We provide dedicated, isolated cloud environments specifically for those surrounding workloads. No shared tenants, meaning your member portal doesn't compete for resources with someone else's application. So no noisy neighbors, no shared compliance surfaces. You get performance that's measurable, documented, and SLA backed. Of course, Nexcess has 16 global data centers, over 185,000 customers. We're not a startup selling a vision. This is proven operational infrastructure that institutions with serious compliance application are already running on.
Thank you for teaching us a little bit more about that. So as credit unions expand their digital offerings, they're often managing a complex mix of platforms and integrations. What infrastructure challenges do you see most often, and how can credit unions better position themselves for success?
Of course, the irony of the digital transformation in financial services is that the faster the institution moves, the more compliance risk they accidentally accumulate. The pressure to launch a new digital product is real. Members expected, boards expected. Obviously, the competition is on their heels, but speed without a solid infrastructure foundation creates debt that comes due at exam time, and that debt accumulates and it becomes bigger and bigger. Number one challenge is the shared tenant risk. The number one thing I see is that credit unions who moved workloads to public cloud to save money and generally don't realize they're now sitting on a shared infrastructure. They think we're in a cloud means we're protected. What it often means is that their member data and application are sharing compute resources with a neighbor. Regulators are catching up to this fast. The question examiners ask about cloud architecture today are nothing like they were a few years ago. If your answer is we're on AWS, that's not an answer anymore. They want to know isolated or shared. How is this environment segmented? What are the responsibility boundaries? Credit unions can't answer those questions cleanly, are going to have a hard time with their next examinations. And of course, digital transformation rarely happens in one clean move. What actually happens is year one, you launch product A. Year two, you add something else. Year three, you bolt on fraud and analytics tools. Year four, you may add a chatbot. 5 years later, you have 7 vendors, several integration, and a web of connections that the IT team partially understands and your compliance team has never fully mapped. So when something breaks or when an examiner asks you to walk through your technology architecture and nobody can give them a clean answer, that's a real problem. What we provide is a documented, isolated environment where those workloads live in a clearly defined space with clear ownership. It doesn't fix the integration complexity, but it makes it legible, which is what you need for compliance and for troubleshooting.
So as regulators place more focus on the digital environment, what should credit union leaders be doing to ensure that they can confidently explain their technology architecture during an examination?
Yeah, the regulatory environment for digital infrastructure at credit union has changed fundamentally in the last few years. Cloud environments and incident response that have become significantly more specific. What used to be a general, you do have controls in place conversation is now detailed architectural review. Leaders who are not ready for this are going to find out the hard way. I'd frame it this way. If a regular walked in tomorrow and asked these 5 questions, could your team answer them without hesitation? 1, can you clearly explain your technology architecture in plain language? Not your IT director, you as a leader. If the answer involves a lot of, well, maybe that depends which system, that's a gap. 2, does your non-core digital infrastructure actually reduce risk? Or does it create new exposure? Most institutions assume digital equals more risk. That's not true if the infrastructure is built right, but you have to be able to make a clear case with documentation. 3, are your members facing isolated from systemic failures? If your digital banking portal goes down because something failed in a shared environment, you don't even know what was shared. That's a conversation you don't want to have with your board after the fact. 4, are your vendor responsibility boundaries documented and current? Vendors management is one of the top examination finding across the credit union industry right now. Every vendor, every integration needs clear agreements, clear accountability. And finally, will your current architecture simplify or complicate your next exam? That's actually the most important question. Infrastructure should be a source of confidence in examination, not a liability. So what do you do about it? Run an architecture review that specifically covers non-core digital workloads. Most institutions only audit the core. Make sure every infrastructure vendor can give you actual compliance documentation. And brief your board and leadership in plain language. Examiners are increasingly talking directly to executives and board members, not just the IT team.
Credit unions have always competed on trust and relationships. How has the definition of reliability changed in the digital first world, and what does that mean for the member experience?
There's a phrase I use a lot internally. Infrastructure used to be invisible. Now it's the brand. And credit unions need to internalize that. For the first 7 years of credit unions, reliability meant something very specific and very human. You would go up into a branch when you needed something, you talk to the teller, your loan officer picked up the phone when you call. That was the product. The infrastructure behind it, the back of office systems, the mainframe, none of that was visible. You just came in and had a relationship. I think that world is still there, but it's becoming less and less so. So when a member opens your app and it loads in 3 seconds, they feel it. When it loads in 8 seconds or it doesn't load it at all, they feel it too. It's almost like standing in a line or being disregarded by your teller. And unlike a slow teller, they don't complain to you. They just leave. Silent attrition driven by digital experience failures is one of the most underrated risks of credit unions right now. The reliability bar has completely shifted. It used to be, are you open 9 to 5 on Monday through Friday? Do you have a drive-through? Are you open on weekends? Now it's, does the transaction go through at midnight on Sunday? Does the portal work on mobile Safari? Does the balance update immediately after deposits? These aren't luxuries, they're expectations, they're the baseline, and the infrastructure behind it, all of it has to be built to match. And also, there is a trust equation. Members choose credit unions for a reason. They trust you more than big banks. They trust that trust is an asset and it's a fragile and digital world. With fintechs and banks and everyone kind of competing on customer experience, every slow login, every failed transaction, every error message chips away at it. And the hard truth is they're not comparing you to another credit union. They're comparing you to the best digital experience. And that could be even something from outside of financial services. They may have their favorite workout app that works every time, but that's what digital experience means. We're being compared across the board. And what does that mean operationally? Uptime and performance are now members' experience metrics. They belong in the same conversation as a net promoter score or a member satisfaction. SLA-backed infrastructure isn't just a vendor contract term. It's a commitment to your members made on their behalf by your technology team. The credit unions that are winning on digital aren't just the ones with the prettiest apps. They're the ones who treated the infrastructure underneath it with the same rigor they brought onto branch services. Because the relationship is still the product, the channel for the relationship is just different now.
So as we look to the future, what is Nexcess's focus on the road ahead?
Well, definitely AI-ready infrastructure. Nexcess recently launched a global specialty cloud for AI and mission-critical workloads. The future for financial institution involves AI in fraud detection, member personalization, and operational efficiency. Those workloads need purpose-built infrastructure, not a generic cloud. And in general, financial services are the frontier institutions that want to move fast and they need infrastructure partners who absorb regulatory friction by default. Cloud without compromise, that is our core mission. You shouldn't have to choose between speed, agility, and compliance and security ever. The future is infrastructure that delivers both. And of course, we're expanding our ecosystem. Nexcess, servers.com, and Liquid Web each serve a different need in the stack. The combined platform means customers can start simple and scale performance without changing vendors.
So to wrap up the show, we like to have some fun with some rapid fire questions for our listeners to really get to know you better. The questions are rapid, but your answers certainly don't have to be. Do you think you're ready?
I think I'm ready.
So who is someone in your life who's a great leader and what makes them great?
I think my grandpa, he passed away, but I think my grandpa was a really great leader. Actually, he was kind of SVP of a local banking branch. So I have kind of banking and financial institutions in my blood, but I think he was just a super funny guy. Even when you were getting seriously chewed out, it was all with humor. And I think that always brings compassion and humanity into any conversation. So I think that makes a great leader.
I agree. Maybe our grandpas were a little bit alike. I think even when I was getting in trouble, my grandpa was pretty funny. So if you're going to splurge on something and you really want to treat yourself, what's one thing that you might invest in a bit?
Definitely skincare, the science. I like experimenting with all sorts of anti-aging potions. I love them, overspend, have drawers full of them, had several allergic reactions, but I think it's kind of fun to see if you can slow down the process a little bit.
I like it. I find that even with all the understanding of science, sometimes I think I know what I'm doing. And then I'm just like, well, that feels good. I'm just going to keep using that.
For sure.
So if you are traveling for work, which city are you most excited to visit, whether that's for a client visit or a conference?
So historically, I always traveled to the coast. It was either California, maybe like Washington, and of course, like New York, New Jersey. Now with Nexcess, I get to travel to Nashville quite a bit, and it's exciting. The South in general is a part of the country I've never explored. And whenever you go somewhere, it's kind of a door opener. So I'm super excited to visit Nashville, kind of explore around there. I also climb, so I'm hoping to visit the Smoky Mountains and do some climbing. It kind of opened the door to that state for me. So very exciting.
Wow, climbing, that's super cool. I don't know that I have the upper body strength, but I aspire to. So what is one book that you think everyone should read?
I will highly recommend Maniac by Benjamin Laptut. It's a semi-biography of John von Neumann, who was the person who created the first computer. And it's also kind of a meditation on AI. It kind of goes through the first time that the AI beat human at the game of Go. And it's a bit of an exploration of what are we gaining, what are we giving up. It's a great read. Lots of kind of historical facts behind the Manhattan Project, the first computer, but also where are we going and what are we losing? What are we thinking about and what's exciting? So super relevant. He is a great writer. I highly recommend any of his books, but this one is particularly great.
Oh, we'll be sure to link to that in the show notes. So what have you found is the best hack for creating balance and integration between your work life and your life?
Get up early. I think I'm kidding, a lot of people have this 5 a.m. club, but I found majority of my life, I was kind of a night owl and then kind of something switched and I wake up really early. I love to start work at 7. I think that usually gives me enough time to kind of go through my emails, but then also be there when my daughter comes home and I'm kind of ready to have dinner without kind of checking my phone because, I was kind of able to catch up on stuff a little earlier. So that's my hack. But honestly, I think the thing is we can't have it all. It's always a compromise. And I think part of becoming an adult is kind of realizing that.
Yeah, that's certainly a realization that hits you right in the face. So we'll be sure to link to everything we talked about today in the show notes. But my last question for you is, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share or asks of our listeners?
Yeah, my final thought is, I think this is kind of the theme we've been going over. The credit unions that win in the next decade won't be the ones who build the nicest apps. They'll be the ones who build the most trustworthy infrastructure, the apps that always work. And the trust in a digital world is a technology decision.
Well, thank you again, Kamila, for being on the show. For episodes like this one and more from across the credit union movement, please visit CUInsight.com to read, explore, and subscribe. Stay well, and thanks to all of our listeners today for tuning in. We'll be back again next time.